Hello, everybody. Welcome back to part three in this short series. I'm preparing for a software development with Java class that's going to be running this fall. And for the final project in the class, it's going to be a Spring Boot project where they create a web app and a REST API. Or, well, they create the final project is a web app and a REST API that delivers some data related to that application. And yeah, we're going to do it with Spring Boot because that makes up things so much easier. All that stuff in the background that we often have to do in Java projects where we have to describe how our project is to run. That is just very much boilerplate code and doesn't require a lot of thought. A great thing for a computer to type for us. Spring Boot sets all of that up, so we just jump into typing the Java that's immediately relevant to our project. Makes things a lot easier that way. So in the first video, we built a REST API, and in the second video, we created a simple JSP page that just kind of opens up. But part of the project is a web app, so we need something that will accept user input, do some processing, and spit out some output back to the user. So we need something with a form on it. So I'm going to come over here and copy this JSP page, copy that, paste that, and for the example here, doing a tip calculator, that usually makes a nice example. I'm going to right click and rename that copy to tips.jsp. Sounds like a good name. And we'll put an HTML form in here to get our user input. A couple of little changes. This is going to be each tip calculator. Maybe a link back to the home page. Or go back to the home page. With a anchor tag with hyperlink reference to a dot for this domain. Actually, just a dot in this case. Go back to the top of the domain. Yeah. I'm going to copy that. So select that line and copy that over to the home page and add a link to the tip calculator here on the home page. I guess I could have done that the first time. We also have a tip calculator, or we will have one soon, in the paragraph, and need this to be an actual link. So anchor tag with hyperlink reference to the dot for current location, and then go into tipping. Sounds like a good name for it. We haven't actually made that up, so we need to remember it's going to be called tipping. And I'll just go ahead and copy this over the same page, the other page. That way we have the same. I guess that's navigation. It's not a very good navigation bar, but the same navigation functionality on all the pages. Consistency across our site. So this is where we're going to do stuff. So we'll need a form. So I'm going to create an HTML form element and add a little bit of space in here. And we'll need two little attributes. What do we do when we submit the form? I'm going to go to maybe totals. That sounds like a good name for it. And how are we doing it? I'm going to use the get method for this instance. Get will show in the URL and post will not show in the URL. So obviously if we can see the data that's being transferred, it's a little bit easier to debug it. And before I forget the name, so this is under tipping. And when we submit the form, it'll be totals. We will need to add those to our page controller. So I'm going to add, just as comments right now, there's a tipping and there's a totals map. Tipping map and totals map, and we'll come back and make those, make the methods for those in a moment. So for our form, let's put a paragraph. It's a tip calculator, so we need to know how much the meal is. So we'll say meal price, and then add in an input field. with the type of number, step size of 0.01 since it's money, and then we need a name attribute because we're dealing with things that will be sent to the server, and the server receives them as key value pairs, and the name attribute in the HTML tag is what is the key when it gets to the server. So we need a name attribute. I'll just call this price. In that, in the paragraph, another input. I'll call it satisfaction. We'll just do a little slider to say how happy we are. So input type equals range. That's the little slider things. And they can be made to work with floating point numbers, but uh, over the years I found it's a lot easier just to leave the range set to integers and then convert them to the decimal values or floating point values if that's what you need. Because if you set a range input, HTML range input as for decimal values, you get logarithmic scale instead of linear scale. So I find it's a lot easier just to grab an integer and then when we go to do the processing, convert that to the floating point number we need. I guess this one just needs a name. I'll call it satisfaction. How happy are we with the service? Whoops. And then in the paragraph. And for some sort of indication, I like to put little emojis. They are part of our language. So if you're learning programming in the modern world, you want to make sure you know emojis. This is going on YouTube, so I'll throw in a sentence here in America. But in spring of 2023, the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, passed regulations regarding emojis. It does not get more formal than government regulations about emojis. And don't send somebody the chart emoji and the rocket emoji. That can be used as evidence in an insider trading trial. But it doesn't get more formal than that. I'm constantly getting formal business emails that have emojis in them. They are part of our language. So for HTML, they just go in as a special character. And I went and looked up the Unicode value, but I couldn't remember the syntax for hexadecimal. So I remember the syntax for decimals, and I found it easier just to convert that. So 128530 is the displeased smiley face, and ampersand for special symbol, hash for a decimal Unicode value, and 128512 is one of our basic smiley faces. So somewhere between disgusted and smiley is our range for that. And then we need our submit button. Input type equals submit. I'll put the words calculate on it. And then an input with type equals reset. And I'll put the words clear on it and the value. Value attribute is what shows on the little button. So that should be good for the form. We get the price and how happy were we with the meal. That's enough to calculate a tip from. And then we'll submit it. And when we submit it, it'll go to the totals URL on our current domain with the get method. So we'll be able to see it in the address bar. And then that's good for debugging. And then any place that you write get can be changed to post later for the release version so that the data doesn't show in the address bar. But it's a lot easier to debug things when we can see the data we're transferring. So we need to jump over here and call the method that will set up the method that we'll call that. So in the tipping map, which if we look at this real quick, I did copy over that first sentence. So we're sending some sort of message. So I'll go ahead and send a message here as well. So again, it's a public string method. I'll call it tips, and it needs to take in a parameter of model type. It doesn't matter what we call it, but I'm going to go ahead and call the instance of it model as well. That's just a good name. And then when the return needs to be a string with the name of the JSP page. So tips as a string, and then it will add the JSP. We saw all of that in the previous video. And that model that we have to send things, we will add an attribute. Don't know why the predictive text didn't work. And first thing is the name for it. The page is expecting an attribute called message, and that message is going to have something relevant. So remember to tip your server. That'll work better than nothing, I guess. And then we need to map that. So at request mapping, we've seen this before. We'll just do a single URL this time instead of the line there. So if we're at our domain slash tipping, I think. Yes, slash tipping. Our domain slash tipping is when it calls this method. Then we need to process the results. So we have our navigation stuff here, so I'll just add that in here. So right click or Control C and Control V to copy that, and then right click and rename it as totals. That'll work. Totals.jsp. When we open that up, we won't need a form. We want to do the results, so we need the regular Spring, or sorry, not Spring, the regular JSP syntax. So if we were just doing purely from the Java language, what's part of the Java programming language, not the Spring framework. So angle bracket %, and then we'll put some Java code in here for what we want to happen. And I'll go ahead and do the page controller stuff while I'm thinking of it. So again, it's a public string, totals. Gonna need something of type model, model.add attribute, and we need a name for it. There's a spot for a message, and the message is going to say my estimate for gratuity is, and then we'll do our calculation. And we'll return, again, the name of the JSP file as a string. So that gets all our controllers. Oh, whoops. Need the annotation for the mapping. Request mapping. And this will be under slash totals, I think. On the tips JSP, when it runs, it's going to call the slash totals method. Under page controller. So slash total. Our domain name slash totals is when we want to run this one. And then for this, we just need to calculate what our tip's going to be. And this is not part of the Spring framework. This is just doing the JSP page is built into the core Java programming language. And let's see, to do that, we need to know what the price is. So we're getting a price from our input form, and that's going to be, well, this is running on a server. So the client is making a request of the server, and that request has some parameters. So we can say request.getParameter. And then the key for the parameter we need is the name attribute from the form. So the name equals price here in the input tag. That's going to be transmitted over here, and we can ask for the name parameter here. But it's a double, so following normal Java syntax, we need to do a parse the double out of that parameter. Satisfaction is an integer. We just used the range and default settings, so that's going to send an integer. I'll call it the same thing. Satisfaction is the request from the client. Should have some parameters with it. we'll grab the one that has, oh, why did I put name there? Price. And the other one was satisfaction. It's the name attribute. Make sure you don't type name over here. What was assigned to the name is what goes here. Oh, yeah. And then integer.parse it. Then we can do the calculation for it. That's pretty straightforward. So our double tip percent is satisfaction divided by 100.0 so that we have get a floating point number back. And then our actual tip is going to be the tip percent times the price. And might as well put in the whole total. So the total is the original price plus the tip. So nothing too complicated in the logic there. I'm going to do a decimal formatter to make it look like money. We'll come back and do that. And then we can just throw that on our webpage somewhere for the end user to see. So since the first message is H1, I'll put it in a slightly smaller text, and then in the next video, we'll quickly do a style sheet and some other little follow-up things. Something like maybe you should probably tip some Java value for tip, which will bring your total to percent equals and one of our Java variables over here, one called total today, period. And in that H level 3 header tag. I'm going to add a decimal formatter there because this is going to have probably, it could have the wrong number of decimal places for money, but let's see what it looks like. We'll format it after checking it. So when we run it, it should spin up the Tomcat server pretty soon. There we go. So we can open up the browser and go to localhost port 8080. There's our home page. We go over to the tip calculator, see the disgusted emoji and the happy emoji. Should be able to enter some numbers. So maybe $34.56 was the cost of the meal. There was really good service. And when we hit calculate, oh, got an error somewhere. So let's see if we can track down the error. I'm going to pause the video and find it, and then we'll talk about what it is, because y'all don't need me to, you don't need to watch me read through the code to try to figure out where the error is. It's probably the result of a simple typo from talking and typing at the same time. So I'll be back in a split second after I find where the error came from. Well, it didn't take me too long to notice that this is not the name of that method that most of us learned the first week of Java class. It's integer parse int. So let's give this another run and see if that was the error that prevented it from working. Probably should have done a couple runs along the way. So the tip calculator, 2345. Maybe really lousy service this time, and calculate that. Ah, there we go. So we got our tip and our total, but those do not look like money, so we need to do some formatting on that, which I also wanted to do because that includes the import here. So we'll need I like to use decimal formatter. We have all the currency things that'll pull geolocation and give us the right currency for wherever we're at on Earth in that. I'm just going to use decimal formatter today. So a JSP tag for at page. And for this particular page, we want to import, or it's a tag, so the import attribute set to java.text.decimal format. And That's a nice, easy way to get easy thing from the core language to get the formatting up there. In that tag, so one of our page tags just gets import equal to that. So hopefully you can see the similarity in the regular between that tag and this. If you haven't seen JSP much before, uh, it's just moved over to HTML format or sort of a tag format. And then when we get down here, we can do a decimal format object. I'll just call it DF. Is a new decimal format with the syntax of maybe a number, definitely 2 decimal places, and nothing more than 2 decimal places. Actually, we probably want something out front too. So hash is if you have the number, put it there, and a 0 is definitely put the number there. So we probably want to see all of those, and it will automatically fill in anything to the left. Then we can say df.format that tip, and maybe put a $sign right before it. This $sign is different than this $sign. Oh, we can see it highlighted in NetBeans. So this $sign curly brace is related to the Spring MVC controller, and this $sign is just the actual $sign symbol, and it follows right before the JSP tag. df.format. So that format we just set up on that one, and then actually throw the $sign character in the front of that. So that part is a little confusing. This $sign is part of the Spring MVC package. Hopefully if you're using another IDE, it's highlighting it the same way. So you can see that $sign is part of the coding, and this $sign is actually the character $sign. Should give us some nice formatting. So stop the previous run and run that again. You always got to remember to stop the server running before you run it again. Open up a browser. Check the tip calculator, maybe 5678 with really good service. And when we calculate it, got an error. Once again, I will try to track down that error with the video pause. You don't need to see me reading the code. And I'll be back in a split second with what the fix on that is. But again, it's probably just a typo that worked its way in. Oh, actually, I can see it. I don't even have to pause and look for it. This is Java code. Inside the angle bracket % tag is Java code, so we better have semicolons, the end of instruction character, as we read it in the text file. Technically, when it runs through the CPU, the computer is reading a stack backwards. Our code goes in as a stack, so the computer reads it backwards. So technically, internally, that's next instruction. But for where it goes in the text file, it's a lot more productive to think end of instruction. Let's see if that was the only error. 5678. Really good service. Calculate. Oh, there we go. That looks like the proper output for a tip calculator. We can get back to the home page. We can view our API. So that's the basic idea of the thing. You can do one more video with a very quick style sheet. Probably just change the colors on that and be done with it. Just mostly just to show where the style sheet goes. And then we'll add the actuator as a dependency so that we can take telemetry. We can see how many people have visited our site, how much of the CPU we're using, how much RAM we're using, how long it's been up for, or if it crashes, how long it's been down for, and all of the telemetry stuff about our project to see how it's running. That's basically built into Spring Boot. Really, really easy to do. So we'll see that in the next video. I will see you then.